right, welcome back to the Barbell Medicine YouTube channel. I'm Dr. Jordan Feigenbaum. We're doing another training vlog. We've got questions from you, we've got form checks from you, and we've got some form checks of myself and Dr. Baraki. Stay tuned to the end of the video where you can learn how to submit your own question, your own form checks. It's a new email address, so make sure you're sending stuff to the right inbox. All right, so let's start off with a question from Ifty. He says, you mentioned in a recent live stream that the starting strength novice linear progression has multiple shortcomings. What are they? What would you add, remove, or improve about the program to overcome them? So, that's a big question, and just as a general overview, we separated from starting strength in February. We have an open letter about why that happened as far as we're willing to share. I don't really think it's worth beating a dead horse, but we are separate from them. And I do think that there are shortcomings with the novice linear progression. First, people don't usually adhere to it very well, even a self-selected population who's really into that type of training and, was going to go through the trouble of actually logging all of their stuff on the Starting Strength website. Only 2% of them, or less than 2% of them, actually did the program, even with a 20% sort of slop margin built into that. So people aren't really doing the program, and at some level, there's a problem with how the program is communicated, even though there's a bunch of resources available to the lifter, which I do think can be valuable. But overall, I think that calls into question, how are we actually doling out these recommendations? Other things, it's hyper-specific, and generally in physical development, you would not hyper-specialize early on in an athlete's career. That tends to be less advantageous than developing a broad base of physical skills and movement pattern proficiencies. So early hyper-specialization is probably not a great idea. It doesn't focus on building work capacity. It has no conditioning component to it. And the stress isn't necessarily modulated well over time. You would want progressive overload, and the program tries to do that via just increasing weight on the bar. However, this actually is not an increase in intensity over time because the average intensity stays about the same workout to workout. If you're just adding 5 pounds, but the relative effort does not increase over time, that's not actually progressive overload. You're actually just using the same average intensity, which, that's not necessarily a good setup for long-term success. Additionally, there's no volume increase over time. In fact, there's only a volume decrease when you start deadlifting less. So overall, I think there are many shortcomings. So many, in fact, that I probably wouldn't routinely recommend modifying the program when it stops working. Now, I think that if you're bought into that sort of program and you like it and you've already started doing it, hey, do it. That's great. We expect it's going to last you 3 months, or less. And then after that, just move on. I wouldn't tweak it. I wouldn't put lipstick on a pig, so to speak, because I do think there are multiple shortcomings. And so instead of just modifying from there, I think rather we should change programs and set you up for long-term success. So again, a novice program, you'd want something that sets you up for development in the long term. You'd want a high amount of movement proficiency across a lot of different movement patterns. You'd want it to build on itself over time. As far as progressive overload is concerned, that means probably increasing volume over time. You'd want it to create a lot of self-efficacy as far as rating your effort or determining your effort levels. So RPE can be useful here. This has been validated as well. So I think that's potentially an inclusion for some novice programming. I would do a higher exercise variation. I would probably use different rep ranges as well. Again, we're trying to develop general physical characteristics early on in a lifter's career, and I think hyper-specialization is probably a bad move. And I think having this sort of arbitrary, let's just add weight to the bar, that's probably not the best idea. So if you want to run it, that's great, but it probably wouldn't be our management. We'll come out with our own novice program. I've kind of been working on it. I just want to clarify some things and make sure that our compliance rate is high with the recommendations that we come up with. So that's what I have to say about that. The second question was, due to decreased neural efficiency, would an older lifter need more muscle mass to lift the same weight he could lift with less muscle mass when he was younger? So this question is from Neil, and I think that it bears discussion of what are the changes that we expect to see in the neuromuscular system from an aging lifter in general. And there's a really good paper kind of covering this. This is from Sandra Hunter out of the, I believe it's University of Milwaukee. I'll link it in the description below. The study was from 2016. So what happens normally to the neuromuscular system when we age? Or in fact, what is the neuromuscular, what are we talking about? It's basically your central nervous systems, your brain and spinal cord, how they connect and talk to the muscles. That's your neuromuscular system at a glance. So things that happen as we age, the motor unit, that's the functional unit of the muscle system. The motor unit is the motor nerve or neuron and all the muscle fibers that it innervates. So one motor neuron, all the muscle fibers that it talks to, that's a motor unit, all right, the smallest functional unit of the muscle system. So you get a decrease in the absolute number of those in general as we age. That being said, the size of each motor unit tends to go up. So you have less motor units, but an increased size of the existing motor units or the remaining motor units. And that's sort of like a physiological adaptation. So basically you lost the absolute number of motor units as we got older, but the size of them got bigger. Other things that happen, you tend to lose certain type 2 fibers and gain other type 2 fibers. You can produce a little bit less force on average. That's due to both the velocity of nerve impulse propagation that goes down. So you can't send, the central nervous system can't send the signal to the muscle as quickly as it did before. And so the rate of contraction, both as far as velocity and total number of contractions, actually goes down. There's other things that happen that change. Calcium content goes down. The sensitivity to calcium, that's an important electrolyte for muscle contraction and muscle physiology. So these things are changing when people age in general. The net effect is, a little bit decreased force, a little bit decreased velocity of contraction. Rate of force development goes down. The stiffness properties of the muscle and the tendons also change. They can actually get a little stiffer, so that kind of might help from an actual force display standpoint. But anyway, these are general trends. Now, no one's looked at people who have been exercising for a long time, right? Especially with resistance training, and how these physical characteristics compare to either their twin who doesn't exercise or controls that are in the same age, same demographic otherwise, but don't exercise. What we would think, due to intervention studies where they actually take older folks and have them start resistance training, we would expect that all of these age-related changes tend to either be mitigated entirely or decreased to a level that become less important. Still, it's not avoidable completely. And there's likely a spectrum of sort of how this changes over time. So some people will have a more, significant change as they get older. Other people will have less of a change, and that's just kind of the normal human experience. That being said, will you need more muscle mass as an older person to lift the same amount of weight that you would have lifted as a younger person due to changes in the neuromuscular system? And I think the answer to that is maybe, but maybe not also. There's no real answer, because you think about it, if you've trained from when you were younger to when you've become older, which we haven't even officially decided on what older is or what that actually means, then your neuromuscular efficiency has likely improved over time. It's not like you keep training it and then all of a sudden it starts getting worse. It may be worse than what it would be if you had trained for that amount of time when you were younger, but it's still probably better than what it was when you were earlier in your training career. So I think that the overall answer to this question is probably no, unless you stopped training, in which case this would just be a question on, in general, do untrained older people require more muscle mass to lift the same weight as a younger person who is untrained? And the answer to that is, well, maybe. Because there's just huge variation amongst individuals as far as their inherent neuromuscular efficiency or their inherent responsiveness to training, all sorts of variables. And that's why we like to say that there are no training variables based just on age or gender even. So we just use this training sensitivity spectrum to sort of describe people. On the one end, you have very, very training sensitive folks, and on the other end you have very training resistant folks, and you can plot everyone across on a line there. The older people in general are going to be more training resistant and less training sensitive, but the very, very training sensitive person at 20 years of age is still going to be fairly sensitive to training when they're 60, compared to the person who is very, very training resistant at 20 years old. So there's this huge gap and that describes, the entire human population across the spectrum. So I think the question probably needs a little more context to be answerable. But hey, we got to cover the changes in the neuromuscular system that we expect with aging, and there's hopefully some exciting research coming out on this that shows the difference in folks who've trained for a long period of time and how they are when they're older compared to those age-matched controls who haven't trained. So let's hop into the form review here. All right, first lifter is Josh Smith, and he's pretty far away from here. This is 180 kilos. He's going to do it for a set of 5. He's got a pretty long torso, so we expect him to be fairly vertical. The knees are sliding the entire way down on that first rep. The second rep, not as much. Third rep is high. The other thing is, out of the bottom, well, that one was better. That was more mid-foot. It's just hard. And fifth rep was maybe high too. Let's look at that again. Yeah, the first one was well below parallel, and then he shifts his hips back on the way up. Second rep was right at depth and a little bit better as far as shifting backwards. Third rep's high. That's why there's no bounce out of the bottom. Fourth rep's high, although he doesn't shift his hips back on that one. Fifth rep is high. Yeah, no bounce. So I think, Josh, the overall deal, some of these reps are high. You've got to make sure they go below parallel. And when you do go below parallel, don't shift your hips back. Keep your knees forward out of the bottom. Think about a leg drive, not hip drive. Think about leg drive. Drive yourself straight up. All right, next video is from Zach Campbell. This is 255 by 4. He must have been listening when I requested the bench press videos. So in looking at this from the side, you see the tip of his elbow. That's the olecranon process. That should be forward of the barbell slightly when the forearm is fairly vertical, and that's good here. He's got a good arch, can keep the butt down. These look just fine. I wish that there was a spotter or spotting arms here, considering the bench is clamped with collars. But yeah, there's nothing wrong with those benches at all. Good job. Last video is from Dmitry Tikhomarov. I messed that up. Now, I do want to say something. Sometimes I think all this training knowledge is actually useless, right? Like I know all this stuff, no one cares. Why am I like this? But then I see video like this, and I look at the plates. I can just tell that these plates are not 450 millimeters in diameter, meaning that this is like a deficit deadlift. So what I would do, I would space the bar up on mats to sort of get it to the right height, because these pulls are going to be like a deficit deadlift. But let's check this out anyway. So we're looking at the plates to see if they roll. Just a little. So that bar was actually forward of the midfoot. The other thing is your gaze is like straight down. I would move your gaze out. Yeah, and see the bar has to be pulled around the knees. So I would move your gaze out, Dimitri. I'd raise your hips up about, well, that one your back wasn't set very well. I'd raise your hips up maybe like a ½ inch or so. Yeah, that one you didn't set your back at all. Okay, so overall, I would raise the plates up so where they would be if you had standard-sized plates. I would probably raise your hips up about a ½ inch or an inch, and I would move your gaze out and really just try to keep the bar on your legs. It's kind of being pushed around your legs there. All right, so we'll move on here. This is Baraki, high bar squatting, 365. That's 370. Much aesthetic. Also, Austin, this is the worst angle of squats you've ever sent to me. We can't even see your face because of the where the uprights are at. This left hand edge of the video is blown out. But we all know you're strong. You're a good squatter. Nice. Much aesthetic. Very athletic. Here's the football bar bench again, 315. Looks like he's on the second handle, so this is even more close grip, so he's going to touch even lower. Seems like his elbow tolerates this much better than a regular bench press. I have no qualms about these bench presses. What I'm looking for is a butt stay down on the floor, or on the bench rather, and overall bar path. And from here, that looked fine. So as I alluded to earlier, I think this is a deload week for me. So I'm doing some slightly different exercises. Here is sumo deadlift. I don't do these normally, but here's what it looks like. Also with pink socks. So I'm supposed to do this for a set of 10. I actually don't know how many I did, and I'm not counting. I definitely can't count in post-production. But biggest thing here that I see, I'd probably try to keep my knees out a little better and try to keep the weight centered over the middle of the foot. I'm just kind of leaning back because it's only 405. But for a guy who never does sumo, those are okay. Now, so what I did was a set of 10, I think. And then I followed that up with 3 sets of 5 on these tempo RDLs. So RDLs, I like to start on the floor versus walking them out. And I do a 5-second descent, really squeezing tight, hold for 3-second pause, come back up, and 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, hold for 3 seconds, come back up. Now, most people cue on the RDL to like just push your hips back, but I don't want you to be back on your heels. I want the weight over the middle of your foot. I'm just really trying to work the top part of the deadlift down. It's not a stiff-legged deadlift. That's another exercise. And most of the time I have people go about an inch or two below the knee as far as the end of an RDL. Here I'm really trying to fight to keep my thoracic spine extended, and I think I do a pretty good job. Here's a view from the front. So I start off the ground rather than walking it out. And I'm looking at my knees. They're fine. I'm looking at the feet. Are my toes off the ground? They are not. So this means that I'm in balance for the most part. Yeah, this looks pretty good. Now I'm just looking at tempo since that's the only other thing I can see from here. The money shot on the deadlift is from the side, right? That's the coaching shot side. This is for the Instagrams. Looking from the front is for show, and then the coaching angle is from the side. But I'm pretty happy with this. Again, looking at the feet, looks pretty good to me. Pink socks for the win. All right, so now I'm going to press 185 for what was supposed to be 10. Again, counting is difficult. And these are probably a little more strict than my regular competition press as far as the hip drive kind of thing is concerned that I talk about in the classic press article. That being said, these are pretty good. Lockout's good. Looking at my feet as best as I can with that bag in the way. And these look okay. Yeah, I have no problems with that. You guys can see that I'm sacrificing a little wrist angle on those reps, and that's just to get the bar lower on my chest. I talk about that in the classic press article, and that's why I use a wrist wrap. Now these are 5-3-0 tempo presses, so the normal speed is up and then down, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You pause for 3 seconds. That's probably a little fast on the cadence, but I do these during pivot weeks. And so that's what I'm doing here. I do 3 sets of 5 after my set of 10. So that was the general setup. Set of 10 on one exercise, and then 3 sets of 5 tempo work afterwards. That was the general setup for most of my training this week. Very cool. All right, what is these? High bar squats. All right, so 365, I believe I'm supposed to do 10. Again, counting, difficult. I really should just pay somebody to come like count for me. That's what I should do. That's a good idea. Hey, excuse me, you want to apply for the barbell medicine intern position? Sure, what do? You just count reps. Okay, so we'll see what's going on here. Yeah, I'm looking at my feet. Yeah, I probably would have gone a little wider on the stance, having seen this now. You can be a little more vertical, helps with the foot position, but this is much more vertical than my low bar back squat, so kind of goal accomplished. The knees don't slide terribly during these reps, so they're kind of getting there and staying there. I kind of like that. I would like to keep my elbows down better, but, no complaints. That may have only been like 7 reps. It's just, counting is difficult. So, and then after I did that set, then I did sets of 5 for tempo. So again, this is a 5-3-0 tempo setup. Yeah, I promise this is not in slow-mo. That's the speed. The idea is you get some more time to focus on your technique, and then also the eccentric loading there is probably beneficial for the soft tissue structures about the joints, and also provide some more fatigue during the training, even given the lighter load. So I typically like this setup for a pivot week for me. Just doing, maybe one set at about an 8, so 10 reps or so at about an 8, and then followed by tempo work. All right, so just close grip bench. This is 300, I think. Oh, 305. Yeah, so closer grip bench, touches lower. You'd have more adduction, adding the humerus towards the middle. And this is a set of 10, which is not a PR. My PR on close grip, I think, is 315 for like 11 or 12. So I did that set. Thanks for the spot, Sam. And then after that, I did this tempo work. Again, the idea is to go slow That's probably too fast. I think I realized that here, and I go slower. Yeah. I actually use this a lot for people who have like elbow or shoulder issues, and so they can tend to bench like this. Not necessarily with a close grip, but the tempo work tends to be useful. Sometimes I'll have them do it to pins, actually, so they can go even slower on the descent. But that eccentric loading stuff tends to be super helpful, both from a training like load management, but then also for tendon issues, if you have them. I'm actually doing deficit rows. I just kind of thought about this. I was like, I wonder if I can make the range of motion a little longer on these barbell rows. So I stood on 2 mats and did a couple sets of, I don't even remember now, this was a couple days ago. So it was somewhere between 10 to 15 was what I was supposed to do. And I don't know how many I did here, and I can't count and talk at the same time, but somebody in the comments will let me know. Yeah, again, with the rows, I don't care how strict they are. I really don't. As long as they touch your chest, I'm good with that. You can program them super strict, but I just, for my personal use of them, for general back jackitude and deadlift gains, I don't see a purpose. So these are RDLs, 455 for set of 10. Again, so those ones I'm looking at my toes, and they're a little light. I would probably try to stay a little more midfoot. That one's better. Back looks good from here. Yeah, it is a pretty good set. So I did a couple sets of 10 here. This was yesterday, so I'm more familiar with what I actually did. But yeah, you shouldn't be back on your heels when you're doing RDLs or stiff-legged deadlifts, just like you shouldn't be back on your heels when you're doing regular deadlifts. So you want to be balanced. In balance. Then I did wide grip bench. So normally my competition bench grip width is about thumbs from the start of the knurling. It's pretty narrow, and this is my 3rd finger on the power ring. And so I'm doing a set of 10. I like that Sam is very concerned, like, will I make it? So from here I can see my butt is still on the bench, feet are flat on the floor, keeping my head on the bench, keeping my shoulders pulled back. I don't see a lot of like shoulder protraction. Now, here's the 10th rep. That one should have gone back towards the rack more quickly. And here's the last exercise. I actually just got these from Rogue. So this is like a cambered bar thing. Those things swing, which is interesting. But yeah, it does feel to me like more of the load is on my back and hips, despite the bar position. Although it's really cool, it gives you a lot of feedback about, pitching the bar forward. So I kind of like this. I'll probably use it. Depth is good. I was worried I was going to hit the weights on the floor. But yeah, so this is 350. Well, it's 315 plus whatever those things weigh. I actually don't know. I kind of like this thing, though. I'm just looking at my feet. Yeah. I could have widened my stance a little bit. I don't like the wider stance on the squat these days because it does tend to bother my hips. But might have to just do it and get used to it to keep my feet a little flatter on the floor. The hardest part is re-racking and unracking the thing, as you can tell, because the weights swing. So anyway, this is training vlog number 14. Thanks for tuning in. If you want us to check out a video of yours, form review, or if you have a burning question, send it to media@barbellmedicine.com. That's media@barbellmedicine.com. Please make sure to film it landscape. That's long ways, 1080p or higher. Send it to our address, media@barbellmedicine.com. Thanks for tuning in. Subscribe for all the latest content. Leave a comment below on what you want to hear about next. We'll see you soon.